So, Tom, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you, Jessa.
Would you start by just sort of talking about why you're so passionate about this work? What is it that has brought you to this and what
Sure.
inspires you every day as you get out of bed?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm an out gay man. I work with a lot of gay and queer folks, and in many of the spaces that I think as therapists we often are, they're not always queer affirmative. I think people try to be queer affirmative, but we're usually like the side, the note at the end of the article, not the
Mm,
main, the main bit of what something that someone is talking about. And so I got into this because I really, I wanted to provide really good resources around sex and relationships for gay men.
okay. And I work exclusively with couples, all kinds of couples, but what would you say is important to understand that makes gay relationships different than any other? Because,
Oh,
there's a
there's.
lot of things we all have in common, every
Mhm.
relationship, right? But then there are things that set it apart. So, what would you say?
Yeah, of course. I think it starts very very much with just the way that we're raised. So if you think about being, I'll just use gay men as an example. Oftentimes, we're not raised in households with other gay or queer parents, so we don't have the windows and mirrors that a lot of people do. There are some similarities in relationships, of course, but when you've been raised a certain way and you've been steeped in a culture that is a certain way, and it's very heteronormative in a lot of ways, that oftentimes gay men and queer folks end up trying to emulate straight relationships, which sometimes work and sometimes don't. And so, people are trying to sometimes put, a round peg in a square hole.
Hmm.
And so if we just look at the way that people are raised, if we look at media representation, if we look at different relationship structures, not there's I think a lot more open relationships in the gay male community. So I think it's like 50% versus in heterosexual relationships, it's probably much different.
Right, right. Okay. Are
Um,
there other aspects of heteronormative relationship styles or approaches or something? Like, are there specific things you think really need to be questioned or evaluated for gay
mhm.
men in their relationship?
So I think that all relationships could benefit from evaluating what I'm about to say, but
Okay.
uh, many of us feel like we have to get on this relationship escalator, right? You date for a certain amount of time, you get married, you have kids, you move to the suburbs, all this kind of stuff, and that doesn't work for everybody, and it certainly doesn't work for a lot of gay men. And so, gay men can't accidentally get pregnant, for example. Family planning takes a lot more time. Gay
Hmm.
men are not often still, I'm still getting 20-year-olds in my office who are disowned by their families. So it's
Wow.
like, this stuff is still happening. It's still difficult to be a gay man in this culture.
Wow. What are um what are some of the challenges, I guess, in a sex life for gay men that maybe are specific to gay relationships?
Mhm. Yeah, so many, uh, gay men, I think sex education in general, we don't get a ton of it in many places in this country. But then you add on to that queer sex education, and most people are not getting pleasure-focused queer sex education
Right.
from their families of origin, from their schools, from, trusted mentors. They're not getting that kind of education. So a lot of people are figuring it out and trying things on. And sometimes that can lead to, especially with anal sex, there can be some injuries that happen if you don't know what you're doing. If you think like Brokeback Mountain, you just put a little spit on it and things are going to work out fine. That's a recipe for an anal fissure.
Right. Right.
And then, there's thinking about like what are people attracted to? So if somebody does really want to be in a monogamous relationship versus somebody who wants to be in an open relationship, and what kind of sex turns them on, and when you have all sorts of societal pressures and things, that messages that people have been absorbing since, the time they were very, very young, that gay sex is wrong or immoral or whatever, that does impact people's ability to actually be comfortable and explore and do all the really fun things that I think really exciting sex involves.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some things gay couples can do to improve their sex life? Or, I mean, that's probably such a broad question because people are in different phases or places in their life, but like, are there some
Mhm.
milestones along the way? And then
Sure.
what's the advice as they hit them?
Yeah, so I mean, in my book, I talk a lot about differentiation, this concept of relationship differentiation. And so, in a nutshell, differentiation is about going inward and being able to really connect with your thoughts, feelings, wishes, and desires. And then to be able to tolerate the tension that comes up in a relationship when someone else has their own wants, feelings,
And
needs,
you
desires.
mean they don't always match?
They don't always match.
Right.
Very rarely do they. And
Yeah.
so this comes up a lot with sex. And so the first step is really, I think, going inward and being able to understand what turns you on, what does bring you pleasure, and have you been able to explore that personally yourself? And then can you take those risks and share them with your partner? This is not completely unique to queer relationships,
Right.
but so
Right.
often I hear people come into the office and they have this sexual fantasy that they're really uncomfortable talking about or sharing with a partner. And or they have this kind of porn that they're watching that that they're uncomfortable with their partner knowing about. And so when you add in the internalized homophobia and all the kind of stuff that we have to deal with as gay men, that can make it even more difficult to differentiate, even more challenging to kind of bring forward what you really are desiring. So one of the things that I like, just the foundation there, I think, is really being able to know what turns you on, what brings you pleasure, and then really sharing that with a partner, taking that risk, being courageous, and bringing that into the room.
Yeah. And do you see that that's something it's a lifetime project because that's changing what turns us on, what we want, how things are working, right? Like this is not like a one and done kind of situation.
No, no, a really great point. Differentiation, I think, is a lifelong process. And so sexual differentiation, being able to really explore and know what turns you on. This happens all the time with especially couples who've been together a really long time. Their erotic template, what turns them on, changes over time. And so if they come into the relationship thinking, that they like anal sex and they like to bottom, and then over time that changes and they want to top or be more versatile in anal sex, can they share that with their partner? And then can their partner tolerate that if that doesn't necessarily perfectly align with what they want? Can they bring toys into the equation? Can they bring in a third? What are the options that they can do to actually address that?
So how do you help people with that differentiation, with that tolerating that anxiety, holding on to themselves, but staying in relationship? Like what, I don't know if that's something you can even give some tips on, but like
Mhm.
what are the basic skills that are needed for that or strengths?
I love to use the gym analogy. And so differentiation is like we're working the differentiation muscles. And so you're going to start with something that is not a 10 out of 10 on the intensity scale. You're going to start in this in the shallow end of the pool and you're going to share, maybe something small that does feel a little risky or uncomfortable, but hopefully then your partner can tolerate that and give you a positive response. And you kind of work back and forth so that you start with the smaller weights and then you can build up the capacity over time with some more experimentation and risk taking.
Right. So level of, I don't know, importance or risk in
Yeah,
being the
start
deep in.
small.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't actually like the way you cook the burgers or something, right? Like this.
Yes. Yeah. Start with something that's even outside of sex, because for a
Right.
lot of people, sex is a level 10 issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And what if they don't get such a great response from their partner? If you, I don't know if you're only working with couples, but if you're working with an individual and trying to coach them, support them to have this voice to advocate,
Yeah.
and their partner, isn't on board with this, right? They've got not gotten the same information and they don't react well. Uh,
Yeah.
how does somebody navigate
Unfortunately,
that?
we can't control our partners, right? So
Right.
even if your partner has a reaction where there's smoke coming out of their ears, it's still your responsibility for yourself and for the relationship to bring forward that thing that feels important to you.
Yeah.
Because when people start swallowing things that are important to them, that's when resentment builds up. That's when distance happens. That's when relationships can start feeling stale or toxic.
Yeah. I remember David Snarsh used to say, you only get as good a relationship as you're willing to lose.
I
Which
love
to
that.
me, I know, it's like one of those things I can ponder like a koan, right? Like, but to me, it means if you're not willing to take a stand and take a risk, your relationship is going to be worse for that. Like we have
Yes.
to be willing in some ways to lose
Yeah.
it.
We
Not
can't
like
stay
that's
in the
the
comfort zone.
right, right. That's not the yeah, yeah. So, are there some other developmental milestones for queer folk in their relationships as they progress? Like, are there some standard ways you see that growth or development?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so a lot of my work is based on my mentors, Dr. Ellen Bader and Peter Pearson, and their work with the developmental model. And their model has a five-stage progression through relationship development. I've taken that and added two additional stages for queer relationships
Okay.
because queer relationships are different. And so the first thing that I've added is the second queer adolescence.
Wait, before
And
you do that, will
uh-huh,
you quickly go over the five that's part of their model, just so we have that
sure.
context, and then we'll know what you
Yeah.
added. Okay.
Yeah, so the five that are part of their model, the first one is the honeymoon stage. So that's pretty self-explanatory, but
Right.
the first 6 months to 2 years of a relationship, it's all about the bonding and the connecting and figuring out all the ways that you're similar and all that kind of really fun, exciting stuff. The second stage is discovering differences. And so that is usually when differentiation starts to take hold, where you realize, okay, I'm actually a separate person inside of this relationship, and I need
Hmm.
to, take some exploration there. The third stage is exploration. So after you discover those differences, you can go out in the world and you can start exploring and trying some of that stuff that reconnecting with yourself in those ways. And then the fourth stage is reconnection. So after you go out and explore, how can you come back and reconnect to the relationship? And these aren't, static stages that you're
Yeah,
kind
that
of
you only go
constantly
through.
can
I'm thinking,
move.
right, you don't go through these just once, right? Okay. Yeah.
No, 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 no. And then the final stage that you're working towards is mutual interdependence. And so the ability to kind of move through all of those stages in a more fluid way and be able to hold on to yourself, but also stay really connected to your partner.
Yeah, yeah. So still really differentiation based. I haven't trained a developmental model, so I'm just curious. But okay.
Yeah.
So what are the two that you have added for queer relationships?
Yeah. So the first stage is the second queer adolescence. And so I've added that first before you even get to the honeymoon stage. For many of us in the queer community, we don't go we go through physical adolescence with everybody else, but sometimes we're not able to actually explore and do all of the things relationally that we many people get to do in their adolescence because
Mm,
we don't come out or we're not in safe spaces or there's one other gay kid in school and you're not attracted to them or whatever,
right,
whatever the case may be.
right,
And
right.
so a lot of people have that adolescence a little bit later in life. And it's usually around coming out or when they come to terms with different parts of their identity or start accepting different parts of their identity. And so if you're going through that process while you're also trying to establish a relationship, that can be tricky.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
And then the second stage that I added, and I actually think this is pretty important for all relationships, is the agreements stage. And
Yeah.
so, after you go out and explore, you have to come back and really get clear on what those agreements are.
Right. Okay, so that raises the question of does monogamy have a role in the gay community? Is it dead? Is it, is there a movement back towards that? Because you said like 50% of couples are open, gay
Uh-huh.
couples, right? At least. Where does monogamy fit in here?
So I always kind of give the caveat here that we don't really have enough research studies. There are some studies, but we really, really need more research on this. But the statistics go anywhere from like 50 to 65 to 75% of gay couples are monogamous. There's a lot of if you talk to a lot of gay men, they will lament if and they want to be monogamous, they will lament the fact that on all the apps and everything, there's so many people who are in open relationships, and it's very
Uh,
difficult to find a partner who actually also wants monogamy. So there is inside of the gay community a lot of I think frustration with this process for people who want to be monogamous. But monogamy happens, monogamy works, but for those people who want to be monogamous, I think it's really important that they just get clear on what monogamy means to them.
so say a little bit more about that. What can monogamy mean?
Yeah, so this comes from Joe Court, who's another, fabulous gay therapist in the field,
Yes.
mentor to a lot of us, and he often says you've really got to define your monogamy. What does monogamy mean to you? Because the example I use a lot is like, okay, I'm on Instagram and I'm sending nudes to my ex. Is that still monogamous or is that not monogamous? And really getting clear, like if I flirt with somebody at a bar, is that monogamy? Is that not monogamy? Like, what does your monogamous agreement look like? And get super clear on that.
Right, right. So same thing if you're going to be in an open relationship, right? Getting
Yeah.
really clear on exactly what does that mean? What's within
Yes.
bounds and where does it cross into cheating, right? Because just because it's open doesn't mean it's cheating.
Yes.
Yeah.
The agreements are so important. I think it's Marty Klein who says like unspoken agreements are the biggest cause of conflict in many relationships.
Unspoken agreements meaning somebody thinks it's an agreement, the other person was not so clear on
Yes.
that, right? We just have assumed or something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a process that you take people through to get clear? Because, I'll have, couples coming in wanting to work on this and like they can't. anticipate all the various things that might arise. So
Yes.
sometimes agreements come out of an unfortunate incident or something like that too. But
Yeah. And
how do
I
you work
think
with people in crafting these?
one thing, and I think you're hitting on a really important point, is something I say very, very early on is you're gonna come up with agreements, but sometimes you don't know it's an edge or a boundary until you hit it.
Yeah.
And so agreements are, they have to be flexible and you have to return to them. And when you try something new, have a like post-mortem conversation about it. Did this thing work? Did it not work? If we go to the sex party, like was it a good experience? Was it not a good experience? What was good? What wasn't good for me? So it is more of that differentiation process where you're constantly having to check in with yourself and figuring out, okay, how does this feel in my nervous system? How does it feel in my partner's nervous system? And then let's circle back to those agreements. So
Right.
getting, a lot of people have some ideas of like, okay, overnight guests feels like that's a violation for me, but sex with somebody when you're traveling, that feels okay. So a lot of people have some ideas of what would feel somewhat comfortable, at least to start.
Right. Yeah, it's that middle territory that's a little trickier, right? When we're in the unclear area. And the theme of differentiation is running through the whole conversation about how can you really be clear about what's okay for you and, advocate for that or communicate that. But certainly people hesitate because what if I do lose a relationship over this? Like, what if this is
Mhm.
really important to my partner? What maybe I should just give in or go along or try to be okay with it? How is it that you're talking to people that are struggling with that?
If that is super super common, and if you're giving you're either giving up on yourself or you're giving up on your partner in that situation, if that's what you think is going on for them.
Hmm.
And if you're giving up on yourself before you even risk having that conversation with your partner, you're already losing something. And so, it is scary and it does feel like a big risk for a lot of people. And yet, do you want to be in a relationship with somebody who is not maybe the right fit for you? Sometimes you have to walk away from a relationship and, you have to be willing to do that, I think.
Yeah, we're back to David's quote, right? You only
Yeah,
get as good a relationship as you're willing to lose. That's so hard for people to hear. And I've been in that place historically in my life, right? Like feel so attached to
me too.
something and really hard to think about letting it go, perhaps, even if it's
Yeah,
best. Yeah.
yeah.
So again, this question seems like for all couples, but but maybe there's something different about gay men too. I don't know. But in terms of keeping a monogamous relationship thriving, growing, keeping it interesting, not just sort of asleep at the wheel through this,
Hmm.
how, what are some examples of what people can do to keep that, new, novel?
Uh-huh. So there's a concept that many of us know in the sex therapy community, the accelerators and brakes, right? So the things that turn you on and the things that are brakes that turn you off and are no-goes. I've recently kind of created a gay sexual menu for gay men. And I've been using it with some clients, and it's actually been really fun because it's just a list of possible things that you could do sexually. But there's a lot on that list that is specific to gay men.
Okay.
And so, whether you use a list like that or you go and just go on Pornhub and search for like what are the different categories of porn, and then actually have conversations with your partner and talk about things like that. Go to a sex toy store. Maybe share some of your fantasies. There's lots of different ways that people can keep it spicy and intimate.
Yeah.
But I think, if you give up on your own desire or what turns you on, that's when it seems like a lot of the staleness can happen in bed. And I do think it's usually a differentiation issue, unless it's something
Yeah.
physical or.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, but it's bringing me back to another thing I heard David Snarch talk about, because in the beginning, we're trying to keep each other comfortable. And so the sex life can narrow down to what he sort of called the leftovers. What's easy for you and easy for me and not challenging and we're all comfortable with. And we can kind of live on that for a while, but eventually that really can go stale. And to
Yeah.
introduce something else, you do risk discomfort, your partner's reaction, whatever, but there's the growth, right? And that's what can keep it
Mhm.
alive. Yeah.
And I think I saw a study recently that like the optimal novelty factor is like one in 12. So basically once a month having something new and novel in your sex life.
Right, right. It's not like it's every time has to be new or different or raising the bar or something like that. Yeah, that's really attainable, I think, right? Like every once
Hmm.
in a while, just throw something in. And your list, that's interesting. So it's basically sort of like a yes, no, maybe. list,
Yes,
but
exactly.
specifically for gay men. One of the things because I created one too, not for gay men, but for people. Um, and I differentiate between, is this something I want to do potentially, or is this just something I want to think about?
Hmm.
Right? Because don't you find that some of the fantasies or the erotic interests or whatever are really fun to imagine, but you wouldn't want to do in real life?
Exactly. And I had a conversation recently with a couple where they were talking about this and just the idea that it could be a fantasy or something that they don't even want to make the fantasy into reality, but it's something that interests them or is a maybe or something. Just that can introduce like a level of aliveness into the sexual conversation.
Right, 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 right. Anything I forgot to ask you that you want to touch on?
So one thing that comes up sometimes, and it may come up with some of your listeners, is that I will sometimes get clients who come to me after they've worked with a straight therapist or a therapist that they assume is straight, and they will often say, "Oh, it was a great therapeutic relationship. I loved that therapist, but I just didn't feel comfortable talking about sex."
Mm,
And so, if you are a gay man out there and you're working with somebody, or I would almost maybe trust that gut, like, okay, maybe that therapist isn't fully safe. But you kind of like what we've been talking about with differentiation. If you've got a really good strong relationship with them, take that risk and just bring up something small and
mm.
see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, you can leave them and go find a gay therapist. But there's not as many gay therapists out there, I think, as there are gay clients.
Yes. Well, this also raises like certified sex therapist versus not, right? Because there are an
Hmm.
awful lot of couples counselors and therapists out there who that people could be seeing who could attempt to talk to about sex. And some of them
Yes.
are going to be okay, but a lot of them have no training and maybe aren't comfortable or safe too. So it's like it's even harder to find a gay sex therapist, right? Than just a gay
Yes.
therapist. So it's like a
Yeah.
little bit needle in the haystack here, but
Yeah, and as I'm 2 supervision hours away from submitting my certification, and
congratulations. I know what a journey that
thank
is.
you.
Thank you for doing it.
It's like trying to get another master's degree.
Yeah,
Um,
practically.
but in that process, it's been really interesting because there hasn't been as many opportunities to learn about queer sex as I thought there would be. So I
Hmm.
think in some ways, like it's even, a gay therapist will have some knowledge, but like a gay sex therapist, hopefully, like I just hope that we can continue to evolve the field and bring
Right.
more appropriate resources to people.
Yeah, and you're out there doing really great work, and I hope you're teaching and writing. And I do want you to mention your book here in a second, but hopefully you'll be maybe leading the development of the field with this information.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we'll see.
So, so talk about your book and where people can find you, what you might have available that listeners would want to check out.
Sure, yes. My book is called The Go-To Relationship Guide for Gay Men, From Honeymoon to Lasting Commitment. A long title, I know. Uh, you can get it anywhere you get books, so
Right.
Amazon through the publisher. And then my Instagram and my website is thequeerrelationshipinstitute.com. And so if you're a therapist, I provide training in the developmental model from a queer perspective. I also have some free communication courses and things for people who may want to, just work on their relationship a little bit there too.
Well, perfect. Thank you. I'll put those links in the show notes too, so people don't have to be jotting it down.
Great.
Well, thanks so much for being with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me.